this. I personally have been a very big fan of yours.
Really?
Since I was, yeah. In fact, I still have your 45s, all of them.
Wow.
And the pictures, and the ones with the pictures, I was able to get those.
Well, most of them had pictures because I fought for that in the beginning. You know, record companies didn't normally do that with new groups, but I kind of felt that our appearance, you know, the outfits that we wore had something to do with the possibility of giving us a leg up, so to speak, in relation to how many records were released on a monthly basis that went out to the radio stations. Remember we had top 40? How old are you?
Of course. Of course. Oh.
Okay, that's good. But we had a top 40 generally, and the top 40 didn't flip. You know, only a few songs were going to leave. So I kind of felt if we had a really neat visual identity, that it might help us along the way. And don't you know that in Columbus, Ohio, there was a disc jockey program director. I'm getting slouchy here, I'm sorry. I believe his name was Bob Harrington, and he was at WCOL, and he was a Civil War buff. And he saw the picture and he went, wow, great picture. I wonder what the record sounds like. So he took it out and he played it, and he went, I love the record. So he said, let's put it on the station and put it on as a pick. You know, so it went to #1 in Columbus, and then the Cleveland regional office of Columbia Records saw the activity, and they called me in San Diego and said, come on, we got to bring you to Ohio. We're going to go meet some people and see if we can make this a record now, because earlier, prior to that, we were getting kind of split airplay because they had side A and side B.
Right.
And radio stations could choose. You know, record companies learned later on that they couldn't give the radio stations a choice, and so they didn't go out as two-sided records at some point. They stopped doing that, and only the A side was on both sides.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anyway, WCOL made it #1, and Columbia Records came and said, let's go promote it, and we did, and it went up to the top 5.
And so you were actually in California, based out of California at
I
that
was
time.
at the time, yeah.
And you, okay, so for #5, so you were getting both songs played on the, they were
In the beginning, Woman, Woman was the A side, a song called Don't Make Promises You Can't Keep, which I think was written by Tim Hardin, excuse me, well-known writer at the time. And radio stations, some were playing Don't Make Promises, others were playing Woman, Woman. And so the two kind of fighting each other were not allowing a momentum to take place. So Bob Harrington, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, kind of changed that because he liked Woman, Woman a whole lot after seeing the picture, and he played it. It went to #1. So from there, we were able to promote it and get out there and make it a hit record. It went to #4, I think, and stayed there for 3 weeks. And then it went to #3. It stayed there 3 weeks and sold about 1.5 million.
#4. Gee, was the Beatles ahead of you?
The Beatles were always ahead of me.
Yeah.
But you know what? In '68, they say that we sold more records than anybody, including the Beatles.
Really?
Now, I always tell people that the Beatles were just having a bad year. But you know, they were going through their breakup motions and all that stuff, and I think that it was probably in relation to single sales. But combined sales, I think we sold about 17 million records in 1968. So, you know,
Wow.
whether it's true or not, it's a nice little badge of honor.
Whether it's true or not?
You know, to wear.
Well, things have changed quite a bit as far as the artists having saved. So they're looking for complete packages now. Of course, with the songwriters and and the singers and so it's really changed quite a bit.
Well, in many ways, back then you really had record companies that could do things for you, and these days people can make records in their kitchen, their bedroom,
And they
their
do.
family room, and they do.
Yeah.
And they go sell them out of their trunk.
I know artists that say I've been hit up with selling, they wanted to sign me to a label who goes, you can't match what I'm doing. The markup on these, I'm very happy.
Yeah, well, they're able to do it. It's just that they want the lion's share. They don't want to give you half of it. I mean, that's where Ray Charles was so brilliant. He just believed he could get half the royalties, and he did. But look at his success. So I don't know.
Well, no, okay, so that was another thing. I remember as a kid listening to your records, and it's like I had very few albums at that time, but I had 45s, and every week I went down and bought another 45. And I have them all. I'll show you someday. But I used to sit there as I listened to you and look on there and used to wonder, these guys, they're dressed up like this. Why are they dressed up like the Civil War? I said, that's so interesting. And I said, well, first of all, they were wearing army stuff, and that was kind of cool to wear army jackets and pea coats and stuff like that, things like that. But I said, this is above and beyond that. And I used to wonder, where were these pictures taken? Do you remember what any of those were?
Oh yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, the very first one was taken in a school where they had taken the wrecking ball and demolished the school. So the first record, somebody, I don't know, it was somebody at Columbia Records, learned about the school, and they said, we know a great place to take the picture because we want to make it look authentic, you know. So they did the picture in sepia tone, which is the old brown tone kind of thing. And the stage from the gymnasium or whatever it was still standing, but everything was just knocked down around it. So except for Gary Witham's horn-rimmed glasses, which I don't think they had in those days, and I think a rubber chicken that Paul Wheatbread had thrown over his shoulder or something, it looks really like, you know, five guys who were in the Civil War, and it was quite authentic. So that's what you found interesting about it, was what is this and why is it?
Well, I started thinking, what are these guys thinking? And what's going through their minds? Because normally it's a bunch of rock people going, yeah, and you're sitting there going, like that, very
stately looking.
Yeah, very stately, yes. And the sound was so different. It really was. I mean, there was other people did. I mean, it wasn't unknown sound as far as a kind of style, but it wasn't what you're normally hearing.
Well, it certainly wasn't the Strawberry Alarm Clock, Incense and Peppermints, you know. It wasn't,
not at all.
You know, it wasn't rock and roll, and that's what the band didn't like about it. But Woman, Woman was and is a great song, and Jerry Fuller, our producer, was and still is, he's pretty much retired now, but responsible for the sale of 120 million records and tapes and CDs. You know, so he was a smart, he was a songwriter, a singer, he had some local success, in fact, of the corporate ladder up to the management area, you know, and so we were never hurting or wanting. Life could be a struggle at times, but it always seemed like, I mean, as kids we didn't know that we didn't have something, you know what I mean? We were happy, we were fine, we always had a meal, that kind of thing. But my parents wanted all of us kids to succeed beyond, so they said, oh please, go to college, you know, get a degree, do something. So I was really kind of interested in child psychology, maybe criminal psychology, and that's what I started out studying. And I found it interesting, but still the music thing was just kind of tugging at me constantly, you know. And I had found a guitar in my grandmother's attic when I was 15 years old, you know, so it had 5 strings on it, but you know, it just excited me, the whole idea of, you know, and when rock and roll came along, Bill Haley and the Comets, Jerry Lee Lewis, the Coasters, the Platters, Elvis Presley, Little Richard, you know, all the real rockers, even the Everly Brothers, and others of that ilk, you know, I was just excited and enthused by it all. So though I tried to go to college, it just, after 2 years, I kind of tossed my books one day and said, I'm going to try this music thing. If it doesn't work, I'll figure out then what I'm going to do. But I was fortunate to be able to.
Well, you got discovered pretty quickly then, actually.
Well, by the time I put the Union Gap together, the Union Gap band itself, we started out being called Gary and the Remarkables, which was a silly title, but it was a working title, and I hadn't yet figured out what I was going to do with it, you know. But I mean, we dressed nicely. In fact, I sometimes tell the people on stage, you know, about this whole thing. And we had nice white pinstriped, bell-bottomed, hip-hugging kind of pants and blue double-breasted jackets with gold buttons. And, you know, we had the new kind of Beatles do, but we were clean-cut. We weren't the tie-dyed, you know, leathers and fringed, holes in the jeans kind of look. And while we were working in Seattle at a club up there, just one day the light bulb went on. I got it because I had this interest, and still do. I've got many books on the Civil War, and it's a very interesting part of
American history.
U.S. history.
Absolutely.
So I said, guys, I got it. We're going to dress in Union soldier outfits. And I had grown up in a place in Washington State called the Yakima Valley. And if you look up Yakima, you will see in the southeast corner of the valley where the river and the railroad go through is Union Gap. And I used to hitchhike there as a 15-year-old kid to wash trucks for the Industrial Air Products Company. And so I would stick my thumb out and, hitchhike the 8 to 10 miles, whatever it took to get there. And I would watch these trucks, and then there was an old man who had to be born in the late 1870s, early 1880s, very, very old. He lived in a little shack out in the back of the property, and they allowed him to live there until he died. And he would come, when I was done, he'd sit on the dock with me and tell me stories about when, steak dinners were a dime and haircuts were a nickel, and, just all those times. And I would just sit there enthralled with this old gentleman. And, he knew a lot about the Civil War because, it hadn't been over that long when he was born. So,
You got first-hand accounts.
yeah, really, almost. And he just loved to tell the stories too, so it was. Anyway, I said to the guys, I got it. Union soldier, outfits, Union Gap, got the name. There's an image, there's a visual. Now we can take pictures, we can make it go someplace, because if you remember, 45 records oftentimes had a little brown cover, a red cover, a black cover. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I went, no, we gotta have a picture. And the record company says, no, we don't do that for new groups. I said, yeah, come on. And I cajoled and
Wow,
fought,
you had a lot of chutzpah.
Yeah, well, they finally relented. Jerry Fuller, our guy, he really did support the group and the whole idea. He loved the first record. He wanted to have success, and he thought that I, as a singer, could have success.
He was right. One more question.
Sure.
Do you remember where you were the first time you heard yourself on the radio?
Yeah, I do. I was in Cleveland, and I was working with a guy by the name of Steve Popovich, who is no longer with us. But Steve was one of the CBS. They weren't called CBS then; they were Columbia Records. And he was one of the regional sales guys who would go out and take Columbia product to the radio stations and all that. And I went out with him to meet the radio station DJs and program directors, and he was constantly pushing the buttons to the stations that they serviced, and that's where I heard it the first time, and I went, that's pretty cool. It's not on the tape. It's not on a record. It's coming in.
Over the air.
So it's kind of fun.
Amazing. Magic moment.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gary, for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You're an amazing man.
Thank you.
That concludes our interview.